Hello and welcome to Cinema Subculture, the channel where we discuss everything strange, obscure, and downright messed up in the world of movies. My name's Gary.
And I'm Simon. So, Gary, what film are we here to discuss this evening?
The Last House on the Left, the 1972 horror film directed by Wes Craven. It features a rape revenge narrative loosely based upon Ingmar Bergman's Virgin Spring. The film shocked audiences upon release and retains its notorious reputation to this day.
So, this is a film, that I have a bit of a history with. Like going back to like my kind of probably like mid-teens, I would say. But remarkably, even though I've owned it several times, this is the first time that I think I've actually watched the full film.
Right, well.
Um, I remember like years ago, like you'll know this reference, Gary, but do you remember the indoor market in Ayr?
Oh,
Sure. So at one point there was going to be a horror convention or something on at the indoor market, and they were going to be shown for the first time. It was back like when this hadn't been released on any kind of format yet in the UK. And they were going to be shown this film at one of these little events. I was doing watching one of the special features on the Blu-ray, and it was saying that apparently some councils could overrule the BBFC and things like that and get away with showing the film. So I think it must have been round about when that was happening. And I think I must have been 16 at the time, and I emailed the organisers to ask if they were going to be IDing anyone, right? Because I was like, this is definitely an 18 film, and like my premise was, or my guise was that I was bringing my younger brother. I was definitely over 18, definitely over 18. I was bringing my younger brother, and he was only 16. So were they going to be IDing anyone? So it turned out no. It seemed to be like they were going to kind of get away with it without having to like ask anyone for ID. But it ended up getting cancelled in the end, so I never saw it. Right, and I was really just interested in seeing it because of Wes Craven and because I was interested in Nightmare on Elm Street and that kind of thing. So years later, I eventually bought the DVD and things like that. And it was around about the same time that I bought the I Spit in Your Grave DVD. Those were kind of it feels like my memory. Those were both available in the UK for the first time, round about the same kind of period. And much like that film, that film was different. It was a lot of the repeated like shots and stuff like that turned me off that film. But I later found out it was due to cuts that were made to the film. But with this, I don't know. I think there was something. I never quite made it through the kind of rape murder part. Like I don't know, something about it just it felt a bit too. I never had a descriptor for it at the time, but I suppose like snuff filmy, it felt a bit too real for me, and it just left me feeling quite uneasy. So I never went much further than that. So imagine my surprise this time when we get through it, and it's I totally thought that the parents, for example, were a complete throwaway characters at the beginning that you would never see again, and it becomes like the kind of revenge film that similar to what I Spit in Your Grave is, but also like how, I guess how, what would you say, like tongue in cheek, I suppose the film feels for a lot of it, like, and how kind of it really didn't feel very. No, I don't mean didn't feel violent, but compared to some of the stuff, and even I Spit in Your Grave, for example, it didn't feel like it was as shocking to me now as it felt to me back then. But yeah, I got through it this time, and so this is the first like, proper viewing of it. And I really there's something about the kind of weird kind of slapsticky tone that I really like, and I think feels quite almost modern with horror films. It seems like an interesting feel to it, but I quite enjoyed it. I did. I think I enjoyed it probably more than I Spit in Your Grave, even. But I need to watch it again. I don't know. I feel I'm glad I got through it because I wasn't expecting where I didn't really know where it went, if that makes sense.
right.
I think it's quite an important film in this kind of subgenre of horror. I mean, I think it's like the first kind of these kind of grimy, quite realistic, violence portrayed quite realistically. But the soundtrack, I think, doesn't do it much favors for its kind of shock factor for me, and for its horror. That definitely kind of undercuts it a little bit. But what's your thoughts, Gary?
Right. Just as a wee side note first, just when you started talking about ghost viewings of this film, that never happened. I've got this mad memory that we saw this at the GFT, the Glasgow Film Theatre. But I've spoke to you about this before, and you said it's definitely not this film. But I can't remember what film it is, and I was pretty certain it was this. But if you're saying this is the first time you've seen it all the way,
Definitely, definitely the first time I've seen it all the way. Like I'm almost 100% sure on
right.
that. Like I
I
need to
remember the
think
experience.
about that.
I can't remember what film it was because there was. I remember sitting there and there was a man introduced it,
Man,
and if
a
I
man.
had to put money on it, I'd put money on it being this film. But who knows? It's
We went to see
lost to
Intruder at the
history.
GFT.
Say again.
Went to see Intruder. Remember, and it was paired
Oh,
up with
right.
that.
Yep. No, this was
Yeah,
in screen
that.
one, the big
I
screen.
don't. I definitely.
Yeah.
To my. I mean, geez, I know I'm getting old, but I really. This is my. I'm sure I've never seen past. Maybe past. Phyllis getting murdered. Maybe a little bit past that, and maybe even when Mary gets shot, and I was like, you know what, I don't know if I don't know if I'm into this, at
Okay.
that time. But yeah, no, that's weird. I wonder what film it's been.
Right. Who knows?
I'll have a think.
Yeah.
But yes, so
Right.
yeah.
So, yeah, I've seen this film quite a few times, and I think we have to say that it is a film which the legacy of the film overpowers any kind of merit that the film itself has. I think, in my opinion, the legacy kind of overshadows the content in a sense, and the legacy is not misplaced because I feel that this film, watched it again and realizing like it was 1972, this film is made, has made me think that wow, this feels way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
Because we did have there was some kind of significant, kind of controversial, violent films sort of preceding this that maybe paved the way that I can think of, maybe Straw Dogs, Clockwork Orange, The Devils. But yeah, I would have guessed that this film came later in the 70s. The sort of tone, the griminess, the exploitation feels more something to do like in the vibe of like Spit in Your Grave. Maybe it's got a feeling similar to Late Night Trains, the Italian exploitation film. But yeah, it is way ahead of its time, I think, and it's definitely an important film which broke ground and paved the way for kind of modern horror and horror that was sort of it's a signpost, a marker for more extreme content which would come. So in that sense, it's quite a remarkable film. But I do feel that although I admire Craven's intentions with what he's trying to do, you can't really hide the fact that for half the film, I don't think those intentions are really executed particularly well. I mean, I admire Craven as a director, and this was his first film, but it does seem like there's an kind of very strange directorial choices on display here. And I think I kind of I don't know if he was just maybe in over his head or trying to do something too much, but there's problems with the film that aren't just about budget or I think or you know a lack of experience. But I think the film significantly suffers from its structure in the sense that the violent scenes, the scenes which are meant to be powerful, are extremely dark, extremely powerful, and they definitely should rank up there as important scenes in history of horror. But then Craven seems to take an approach where he wants to contrast those very dark scenes with light-hearted, humorous scenes. But I'm assuming this is the intention, that he wants to illuminate that the darkness and the disgusting quality of the violence by contrasting it with these light-hearted scenes and the light-hearted soundtrack, which I assume is his intention. But I think for me that just does not work at all. And whenever you're dealing with these kind of more light-hearted scenes. It just feels like it's like two films spliced together for me. So we get a lot of stuff in the setup, building the character of Mary and her family life, and the stuff with the parents. You get scenes. The basic plot is she's going off to the city to see a concert, and the parents are a bit worried that she's going to the sort of wrong side of town, and we get this kind of contrast of the parents at home doing sort of homely things. Everyone's very nice, loving parents. And then we get that contrasted with the kind of darkness when she meets KRUG and company, the gang that will sort of seal her fate. But I just feel that there's a disjointed nature to the film, which I can't quite fathom why, and I don't think it works as a sort of contrasting type of style. But saying that, you can't deny the power of the moments that work. But I think that it does the fact that structurally the film doesn't work for me, I think, is a sort of slight knock on it. And the legacy of the film, when you hear about it kind of, when you actually see it, if you've just heard like the controversy, you'd probably be slightly surprised. I think I probably was first time I saw it, by the sort of strange scenes, especially like some of the bumbling cop subplot. But so I've rambled a bit there, but it's definitely a film that is worth noting as a crucial point in the history of horror. But I think the actual content of the film is very strange and kind of, unfortunately, quite badly directed for me.
That's fair. No, I definitely agree with the comments about the bumbling cops. That did stick out quite a bit, and not really something I remembered from any of my first viewing. I really didn't even, because I mean, like, Martin Cove was in this, and so Martin Cove played John Kreese in the Karate Kid films, right? Like, so I knew him from other places.
Oh, aye.
But it was quite weird seeing that their whole interaction, back to the police station, and they head back out, and they're trying to, the car breaks down. That was very odd, and as you say, out of place. So Craven was talking in this interview about something that split the audience at the time, and it's something that I realised might have been why I stopped watching it when I was younger, right? Because I felt a lot, probably the most connection and interest in like KRUG and his gang, right? Like those characters were quite they were funny, they're a bit more interesting, like they had a lot more interactions, and there is some sort of it gets played off like after they've done what they've done to Phyllis and Mary, as if they have some sort of remorse, or at least can grasp the gravity of what they've done, and maybe the way it's played, it's as if they're sorry almost for it, and that apparently that really messed with audiences at the time. People walked out and things like that because they were like being made to feel sorry for the bad guys after they'd done these horrendous things. And I think maybe there's part of me that was maybe about that, because it maybe felt that something like that, because even this time, up until we get to the point of the kind of murder part, like KRUG, he is actually quite a charismatic person, and it's kind of like a caper movie. It feels like you're kind of on the run with these criminals a little bit, and even like what's the girl's name, Sadie. I think that there's some fun moments and light-hearted moments there that work. Maybe not in this film, maybe not potentially for the tone of this film, but I think that turn, and then where we get this ultra violence almost, and then their kind of weird reaction to it, definitely it sits weird with me still, even now. Like, it's a quite a turn, even though we're told, like, with the radio broadcast, that they're rapists and murderers, him and KRUG and Weasel. There's definitely like a kind of weird, it's not empathy, that's not the word I'm looking for, but there's some, you definitely relate, or I did maybe it says something about me, but I find that you relate more to those characters because you're getting more characterization with them than you do with Mary and Phyllis, or even the parents, which are quite two-dimensional.
Yeah, so are you saying you think the sort of tonal contrasts are kind of working for you?
They no, not necessarily. Um, I don't think they work. I think I don't mind them
Mm,
in this film. I don't mind that type of thing in a lot of films. I can kind of go along with things, and I think this film, if you remove it from its kind of legacy and its kind of place in history as this, like the last house on the left, right? Like if you can remove it from that and watch it as just the film, I think it's like almost like, oh, okay, that's weird, but it comes across as more comedic, as I say, even because the violence now is so, I mean, relatively tame compared to what we get and have seen since.
hmm.
I think it almost could work now better
Yeah.
than it as a kind of, and I don't mean a horror comedy, but like some sort of, some kind of mashup of that. Um, I'm trying to think, I don't know if there's a film like something like Psycho has moments of like lightheartedness and things like that, and a lot of slashers do. Um, no, most slashers do, especially in the 80s, right? Even Halloween has lighter moments, um, but not quite to this extent, and certainly not with the tonal sheet switch that the soundtrack brings. But I don't
Mm,
know. I think if you can remove it from its kind of historical significance and the kind of the film that it's meant to be, I think it can work, and I think it does work for me in that way. But when you think of it as being one of the most notorious and banned films, and I think like I Spit on Your Grave still for me holds up to that.
hmm.
Um, like complete. I don't know, like the kind of depravity in the film, like still kind of for me holds up to what it's meant to be. I Spit in Your Grave. It's quite a harrowing film to watch. Whereas this, I don't know, other than the actual murder rape scenes, it's not as in my head from my memory. There was more on screen
Right.
even when I was little than what we actually see. So I think
Hmm.
I think it's I think it works, but um, it's gonna kind of got that anchor of that legacy of what it's meant to be
Yeah.
to people.
Um, yeah, I think I admire Craven's intentions because I think in one of the interviews I watched with him, he was talking about how he wanted to do something that did show real violence or violence in a kind of realistic fashion that wasn't shown in cinema at the time. And, in response to the Vietnam War, violence being shown on television, on news footage, and a sort of reaction to the end of the 60s. And maybe there's a sense of like Manson family kind of vibes in there with the gang.
Mm.
Um, so admire that, and I think that there is a hint that of a more kind of deeper thematic content, particularly as we get to the last kind of section where there is themes of class divide and looking into the sort of nature of violence itself, um, where we get this revenge plot coming through where the parents
Mm-hmm.
discover that the Krug and the gang are the people who have killed their daughter, and they
Mm-hmm.
decide, right, without much thought, that they must seek revenge. Um,
Yeah, that
obviously, when you,
I was just say that escalates quite quickly from
yeah,
there. Not that I'm saying that it wouldn't, but
mm,
when they find Mary, it's kind of like just off the back of, or no, there's a dream sequence that follows that. Excuse me. There's a dream sequence that follows that scene, but I found the scene that would actually find Mary to be a little underwhelming. Like
right,
when they run out in the middle of the night, I'm like, okay here, but this is going to be quite a sad, emotional scene. And then when they find her, it's like I wasn't sure if she was still alive or not, or if I was seeing a dream again, or
hmm,
um and then the way they cut to on yeah, and then then the film becomes Home Alone.
right,
Like that was surprising to me. That I
yeah,
wasn't really prepared for that. Like I was literally like, oh, this is a Home Alone
right,
film, right? Like when he's setting the traps and stuff like that, which um I'm not sure if Craven does in many of his other films, but he certainly did in Nightmare on Elm Street. you know, there's an end sequence in Nightmare on Elm Street where it becomes Home Alone as well,
Right.
with those traps set and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I did think that from there onwards, the film became quite like fairly choppy and like almost
Right.
a rush to the end.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, sorry I interrupted you.
Yeah. So, I mean, the film has been celebrated, like Mark Kermode would celebrate it as, you know, having good intentions and, you know, really kind of portraying violence in you know, looking at this idea of violence as it really is. And, you know, we see both sides. We see violence perpetrated and then the revenge sought. Um, and um, we could debate, you know, how well the film kind of deals with that. There is that last sort of shot where there is a sense after, you know, the father, I can't remember the character's name, but he sort of kills the KRUG character, and there is a sense of like regret, that what have I done type of reaction.
Yeah, I
But
don't know if I like you're. I get what you're, and I think that might be
mm,
what they're going for. But I think in the moment it's like I don't know if I see regret for the murders. It's more the oh yeah, my daughter's still dead kind of thing.
yeah,
Like,
well, that's the question, isn't it? You know, how much credit can we give Craven for kind of presenting this idea with any kind of depth? Because
mm,
maybe it's more a celebration of the revenge. I mean, it comes down to I don't think there's enough there either to push it either way. It's all open to
mm,
interpretation. You could see it as a conservative kind of, you know, pro violence, pro vigilantism, you know,
mm,
from that point of view, or you could also read it as a kind of, you know, it's a display of just the horrible nature of violence in general.
mm.
Um,
It
I
could have been
think leading up
interesting.
to the ending, you know, as you're talking about Home Alone stuff, that seems to kind of make the revenge a wee bit light-hearted.
Yeah,
I
it might
think
have
the
been
end scene.
interesting.
I think Craven's intention is to, you know, that to say that violence is regrettable in any
Mm,
circumstance. Um, and I think that's the intention of the final scene, that it was maybe understandable the reaction of the parents, but at the end of the day, they're not any better off
yeah, yeah.
after seeking that violent, you know, justice.
Mm. I was just thinking it might have been interesting if they'd played it off that the dad, the father, Doctor Collingwood, was a character. If he hadn't had any remorse, you know, it might have been an interesting juxtaposition to the remorse that Krug in that show after killing Phyllis and Mary. It
Mm-hmm.
might have been, but then I think that would have been more a commentary on that may have led more into what you're saying about the kind of, you know, just the justifiability or justification of um vigilante or revenge violence. But um
I think we should note that David Hess kind of makes the movie in a sense. His
yeah.
performance is really great,
Mhm.
and you know, it's a performance that he suffered for a
Mm,
lot the rest of his career almost. It was
yeah,
too real for a lot of
yeah.
people, and he got kind of typecast. And actually, talks about how people were scared of him, like on the New York subway and things like that.
Hmm.
Would move to a different car.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I think like for me, he was the most interesting character. So when he does what he does, that kind of almost ripped me out the film. Like, you know, back in the day, like it was because I'm like, oh, this. Like, I was kind of liking this guy, and now he's done
mm,
this like deplorable thing, you know, stuff, and it's pretty bad. But we should also say he's also responsible for the music or the songs in the
yes,
film. I don't know about the actual, you know, the actual score, or if he's responsible for, oh, it just says music by David Hess. But so interesting, like like all the kind of folk songs, like the kind of jaunty tunes.
hmm
I wonder if that's some sort of reaction to what he did in the film. You know, if
right.
he's trying to lighten it up a little bit. You know, but yeah, that's good as well. Also interesting is that so this is a film that's from the parent, if you will, of both Freddie and Jason. So the producer of this film, Sean S. Cunningham, who produced and directed the first one anyway, Friday the 13th. So it's quite an interesting kind of you know, a prism point for where it juts out to like those two franchises as well. I think they'd worked on a previous film together called Together, which was I think it was supposedly pitched as a kind of marital aid. I think it
Right.
was basically like a porn film, but I think at this point they were kind of just trying to get away with whatever they could, like push it, and I really don't think they had any idea what the reaction to this film would be at the time. Maybe that's something we should talk about, is the kind of like, because especially in the UK, it was it was obviously, this was a video nasty,
Yeah.
yeah. So and it remained like unreleased for years, didn't it? I mean, we were talking about that a little bit when I was chatting earlier on, but
Yeah. So the film never got granted a certificate for a theatrical release. And as far as I know, it never got shown really. Like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was the same situation, but that did get shown. Um, and then it came out on VHS, then get wrapped up in the Video Nasty scandal, was one of the banned movies, and then became one of James Fairman's kind of pet films that he just would not allow to be released. So it didn't come out to, I think, 1999.
I think that sounds about
Is
right.
that the
Yeah.
uncut version? There was a couple of versions that were slightly cut.
Mhm.
Yeah, after James Fairman had left the BBFC. So in the UK, it had a legacy beyond the Video Nasty kind of era as one of those kind of totem, two evil kind of
Mhm.
movies that we just couldn't see. So yeah, but I think it's interesting what you're saying about the Cunningham Craven connection, because I think you could say that the profits this film made, and it was like very successful compared to its
Mhm.
budget, kind of funded Friday the 13th and then the slasher boom that was to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, interesting in that respect.
Mhm.
But I think I was wanting to go back to, comparing KRUG, David Hess's role, very charismatic
Mhm.
on screen. I think one of the problems of the film is the other performances. Um,
Yeah.
I think we have the character of Weasel, Fred J. Lincoln, is quite
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
Um, but the Sadie character and the Junior character, I just really don't like the register of their performances.
Hmm.
Again, it causes this kind of tonal imbalance for me, where they're way too high, like they're way too theatrical and histrionic and over the top.
Yeah.
Makes it slightly
Does.
cartoonish, where
Yeah.
you just don't. It just compromises the violence for me, and the impact is, or the realism, I should rather say, is slightly compromised by these slightly sort of theatrical Broadway style performances. So that's a bit of a shame
Yeah.
for
It's
me.
funny that I would definitely have agreed with you on Junior. I quite liked Sadie in this, but I do get what you mean. She feels like in Superman the movie, they've got Miss Tessmacher that that's like kind
Right.
of lackey to Lex Luthor. It kind of reminds me of that character, where it's like, yeah, just a little bit kind of out of place and cartoony and there for some sort of comic relief. So yeah, I do get what you mean, but yeah, certainly David Hess and Fred Lincoln are really good and quite when they turn it on to the kind of more menacing side of it, and they definitely, it definitely works really well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I guess I hadn't Sadie didn't stick out quite as far as Junior did to me, but when
Okay.
when you really think about it, yeah, um, she does kind of, it is slightly tonally off with the rest of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just something I can't really get over for me in the film. And then, as you're saying, the David Hess kind of folk cartoons, really baffling choice over
Isn't
some of
it?
these kind of quite
Mhm.
disturbing, violent sequences. I do like the kind of, there's certain aspects of the score that sort of a squelchy kind of synth thing that are
Mhm.
quite good, but really don't know what was going on there. Choosing, not that the songs are bad, but it's just like
No,
they don't
it
fit
sounds like
there.
something from Smokey and the Bandit and
Right?
some
Yeah.
but it sounds like Krug and his guys have got a theme tune. There's
Right.
one, I can't remember the lyrics, but it's basically something and something and
Oh
something.
yeah. Da,
It's
da, da,
awesome. It's,
da.
it's, it's a good catchy
Right.
tune, but yeah, some of the score, particularly when they're chasing Phyllis through the woods,
Mm.
there's a kind of rhythmic piece of the score that worked pretty well and was quite tense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And then when they kind of confront her, you know, with when he's got the machete and stuff like that, and Weasel's coming at her from the back, that works really well. But yeah, it's a weird kind of mix up of music and kind of inspiration, isn't it? It doesn't quite work with the film in on a whole.
Yeah. One more point I was wanting to talk about was, I think, Craven, the cinematography and the way that Craven positions the camera is kind of noteworthy. I think we should say that even though it's very, the scenes are quite disgusting, the violence is horrible. We have rape and sort of sexual degradation of the girls, that I think Craven frames it in a way which sort of moves the camera to kind of neutral positions and doesn't overly exploit the sex and the violence, maybe in a way that you could say I Spit in Your Grave is a wee bit borderline in that regard. I feel like particularly the rape scene of Mary basically just frames it on the faces of Krug and Mary, which is very powerful. It doesn't take away from any of the power, but you don't have that kind of maybe steady, like, male gaze point of view issue that you may have had in other rape scenes. So I think that's important that it shows Craven's position on that subject. But
it's even the same with the Phyllis. Like there's an implied sexual assault, I guess. I mean, it seems that that's what's happening in the apartment when the girls first go in, and it's the same there. Like it's kind of they take her to the ground, kind of, but the camera just stays on Mary's reaction, or Mary's reaction, and I thought that was, again, that in my head was like a worse scene than what I was actually seeing this time.
Right.
And I thought that was quite, tastefully done. Like, as you say, that was very apparent, even later on, where, they're having the two girls, like, make out or whatever. It doesn't linger on that. It tends to like hold on other characters' reactions, which I think is quite like, you hear Wes Craven in interviews, he seems like actually quite a wholesome guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, I was watching an interview with him, and he was like, he wouldn't say the word shit. Like, he was like kind of he kind of implied it. He's like, that then hits the fan, that way kind of thing.
Right.
And it's like I think he was a school teacher before, and I think he's quite actually reserved in that kind of way for a lot of things. I'm even thinking of like most of his other films, like these big films, they don't have any, like, even for the time, the 80s slasher boom that was kind of going on, that type of thing. There's not a lot of nudity or any nudity in most of his films. I don't think there's any nudity in some of his other films, to be honest with you. So yeah, I think that kind of speaks to the director there, about his kind of trying to like veer away from the seediness, as you say, and try and represent something a bit realer and not have any titillation or anything.
Yeah. Although I was wanting to bring up as well, just that immediately after, in the aftermath of the rape, we get this scene where it sort of lingers on Krug and Weasel and Sadie. They suddenly feel some kind of remorse.
That's
you
what,
just
yeah,
see
that
sort of shots of their faces, which I unfortunately didn't buy at all. I like the intention because I feel like Craven is trying to humanize the violence, humanize the killers, and not have them as some kind of abstract monstrosity, and show that violence actually comes from real life. But I just didn't think that scene was earned at all.
No, I completely agree. I think it may, again, previously it may have made me feel different, but this time I felt it was out of place. I thought it was well acted, and I believed the actors enough in what they were, but I felt in the framing of what they'd already done to Phyllis, and then this, it
felt too quick a switch.
Yeah, at first it felt like Weasel and Sadie were judging Krug on what he'd done to Mary, but considering what just happened, it was very, you say exactly, it wasn't earned. They didn't feel that they were, the characters were actually feeling that, or they'd reached that yet. And especially then, when they go to wash off in the river and stuff like that, it's like almost past.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does feel like he was trying to push it a little bit for us to feel something for them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, well, that'll do it for our discussion on The Last House on the Left. If you've enjoyed this video, please make sure you have subscribed on YouTube, like the video, and hit the notification bell.
Thanks for listening. I've been Simon.
I've been Gary.
Keep it extreme.